To accept what cannot be changed is not a capitulation, but a cultivated discipline, a posture of the mind that aligns perception, emotion, and action with the contours of reality. It is, at once, an ethical commitment to honesty and a practical commitment to effectiveness. Where resistance squanders energy against immovable contours, acceptance gathers that energy and directs it to what remains possible. This practice does not trivialize suffering nor romanticize resignation. Rather, it recognizes limits as boundary lines within which freedom must be drawn. When we speak of acceptance, we speak about a quality of attention that allows facts to appear as they are, unclouded by the fog of wishful thinking or the static of habitual reactivity. In this clarity, dignity becomes possible. The dignity of response in place of reflex, and the dignity of meaning in place of mere endurance. Before going deeper, a brief invitation. If you find value here, please subscribe, like, and share a short comment so this message reaches more people. The mind, left to its own devices, tends to confuse acceptance with passivity. This confusion is costly. It gives rise to the false dichotomy that one must either resist or surrender, fight or fold. But there is a third possibility: lucid engagement. Lucid engagement begins with the precise naming of what is unalterable: death, the elapsed past, another person's will, the laws of nature, the facts of one's current constraints, and then proceeds to ask, given this, what remains within my sphere of influence? In this question, the seed of agency is preserved. Acceptance clears the ground of illusion so that effort can take root in soil that will sustain it. Consider the simplest examples. When a storm closes a road, the driver faced with the barricade engages in a practical act of acceptance. She turns to the map, calculates alternatives, and moves. What she does not do is attempt to bargain with the wind or rage at the rain, because no amount of anger will relocate the clouds. The storm is a fact. Her options are the variable. Acceptance is the pivot that moves focus from the immovable to the adjustable. In more complex terrain, illness, loss, injustice, the pivot is harder to find, not because the logic is different, but because the stakes are. It is here that acceptance requires courage, and where courage is not loud, but steady. The architecture of acceptance rests on three pillars: perception, valuation, and commitment. Perception concerns what we attend to and how accurately we perceive situation and self. Valuation concerns what we hold to be important and why, the hierarchy of ends by which we navigate. Commitment concerns the actions we bind ourselves to take or refrain from taking. Acceptance calibrates perception to the facts, valuation to reality's limits, and commitment to what remains worthwhile. Without acceptance, perception is distorted by denial, valuation is captured by fantasy, and commitment is misallocated to projects that cannot succeed. Acceptance does not cancel aspiration, it purifies it. A rigorous way to practice acceptance begins with an inventory of control. There's a long tradition of this inventory, found in Stoic philosophy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and contemplative disciplines. The Stoics draw a clean distinction. Some things are up to us, others are not. Up to us are our judgments, decisions, and chosen actions. Not up to us are the outcomes of those actions, the behavior of others, the timing of events, and the fact that change and loss are built into the world. In modern therapy, a similar distinction is embedded in techniques that label thoughts and feelings, noting them without conflating them with facts. In contemplative traditions, one watches sensations arise and pass, refusing to cling. These traditions converge upon a single insight. Suffering multiplies when we attempt to possess what cannot be possessed or prevent what cannot be prevented. A practical exercise illuminates the principle. Imagine writing 3 lists. List A, what you can control completely. List B, what you can influence but not control. List C, what you can neither control nor influence. Place each concern in one of these lists with honesty and specificity. A deadline you can plan for belongs in A, a colleague's opinion belongs in B, the weather belongs in C. Then match effort to category. Act decisively on A, communicate and negotiate in B, and let go of C. This is not a once-only task, but a daily recalibration. As contexts change, categories shift. Yet the practice of categorization strengthens a habit of mind that resists the drift toward magical thinking. Objections often arise at this point. One concerns injustice. If acceptance is valorized, does it not excuse wrongs and silence those who suffer? The answer depends on clarity about what is being accepted. Acceptance of a fact is not acceptance of its goodness. One can accept that a wrong has occurred and still judge it wrong, still act to repair, resist, and reform. Indeed, action is more effective when it is not muddled by denial about the current state of affairs. Historical movements for justice demonstrate this. The most durable reforms have been led by people who saw with unsentimental clarity the limits within which they operated, who prepared patiently, built alliances, and chose their battles with a long view. They accepted the existence of entrenched power, not as sanction, but as a parameter to navigate. In that acceptance, they found strategy. Another objection concerns grief. Is acceptance a betrayal of love? When someone we cherish is gone, acceptance can sound like erasure. Yet acceptance in grief is the opposite of forgetting. It is the fidelity to the truth that the person lived, mattered, and is no longer present in the way they were. It authorizes the mourner to keep company with memory without being arrested by it. Many who have walked through grief report that acceptance arrived not as a decision, but as a gradual softening, a loosening of the mind's resistance to the fact of absence. Neuroscience provides a partial account. The brain learns to update predictive models about presence and absence, reducing the disparity between expectation and reality that produces acute pain. This does not eliminate sorrow, but it changes its texture from shock to a bearable sadness that can coexist with gratitude. The seeds of acceptance are planted in attention. What we attend to forms the basis of what we can accept. Attention can be trained. A straightforward method is the practice of naming. When a surge of anxiety rises, silently identify it. Anxiety is here. When a thought loops, this should not have happened. Label it. Resisting. Then return to the immediate sensory world. The feeling of the chair, the temperature of the air, the rhythm of breath. This act of naming creates a small distance between observer and observed, allowing the prefrontal cortex to modulate the limbic storm. Studies in affect labeling suggest that putting feelings into words reduces amygdala reactivity, making it easier to respond rather than react. Acceptance is not merely a philosophical posture. It is a neurobehavioral skill. One might ask, if acceptance is so beneficial, why is it so rare? Part of the answer is cultural. Many societies amplify the message that anything is possible if one tries hard enough. This message can empower in contexts of actual opportunity. However, when applied universally, it becomes a cruelty, transforming unavoidable constraints into personal failures. Another part of the answer is evolutionary. The brain is tuned to detect threats and to seek control because control promotes survival. When control is unattainable, the drive persists, producing frustration. Acceptance does not abolish this drive. It tempers it with wisdom. Consider the arena of health. A diagnosis that alters the course of a life can spark a frantic search for alternative outcomes, some rational, others not. While exploration has its place, there comes a juncture at which additional searching yields diminishing returns and steals time from adaptation. Patients who integrate acceptance often display a paradoxical increase in energy. Freed from the exhausting contest with the unchangeable, they invest in what still lends meaning. Relationships, skillful symptom management, advocacy for others, creative expression. Research in chronic illness management indicates that acceptance-based approaches, such as acceptance and commitment therapy, correlate with improved functioning and reduced distress, not because symptoms vanish, but because life reorients around chosen values. Values are the compass by which acceptance navigates. To accept is to create a cleared field in which values can be planted without being choked by fantasies of control. Without values, acceptance can drift toward numbness. With values, acceptance becomes the staging ground for commitments that endure. Values are not goals, they are directions. One is not finished kindness or complete integrity. One chooses kindness now and again under new constraints. In a context where a career plan has collapsed, values prevent identity from collapsing alongside it. You may no longer be able to do what you did, but you can still embody what mattered in the doing. Service, curiosity, craftsmanship, fairness. Acceptance thus protects the continuity of the self across changing circumstances. Let's consider time. The past cannot be changed, though it can be rewritten in memory, and the future cannot be controlled, though it can be prepared for. The present is the only site of action, yet the present is vanishingly narrow, a knife edge. Acceptance tunes our posture toward time. In relation to the past, acceptance means telling the truth without the added burden of self-flagellation. Regret can be instructive if brief and precise. It becomes corrosive when it metastasizes into identity. One can say, "I did that, it caused these harms, and I will repair what I can," without rehearsing the scene endlessly. In relation to the future, acceptance means making plans with humility, aware that contingency will intervene, and using probabilistic thinking rather than certainty. It is an error to suppose that acceptance forbids planning. It forbids only the fantasy that plans confer guarantees. Relationships provide another laboratory. We cannot control the interior life of another person. We can influence through example, listening, and honest speech, but another's choices remain theirs. Acceptance in relationships is not indifference, but respect. It refuses the project of remaking another person into an image that would soothe our anxieties. Instead, it accepts temperament, history, limits, and style, and then asks whether the relation, as it is, can be honored. Where harm is present, acceptance clears the path for boundaries. To accept that someone will not change is to face the question of what you must change to preserve your dignity and safety. In this way, acceptance is an ally of decisiveness. In professional life, acceptance reduces friction. Markets falter, organizations restructure, technologies disrupt. The worker who assumes permanence resists reality at a cost. The worker who assumes chaos surrenders at a cost. Between these extremes lies adaptive realism. Acknowledge volatility, cultivate portable skills, keep one's identity broad enough to survive a job title's disappearance. Studies on career resilience suggest that individuals who practice cognitive flexibility, reframing setbacks as information rather than verdicts, recover and reorient more effectively. Acceptance feeds this flexibility by removing the accusation that adversity always signifies personal inadequacy. There is a quiet art to distinguishing what cannot be changed from what has not yet been changed. The former requires acceptance. The latter demands persistence. The boundary is not always clear. One may need to experiment, to push respectfully against constraints to discover their elasticity. This is not a contradiction, but a method. Pilot projects, controlled risks, and time-bound trials allow learning without overexposure. When attempts fail repeatedly under varied strategies, acceptance becomes wisdom rather than defeat. Thomas Kuhn observed that paradigms shift not merely through novelty, but through the accumulation of anomalies that the old paradigm cannot absorb. On a personal level, acceptance often arises when anomalies, evidence that a path no longer works, accumulate to a threshold. At that threshold, honorable retreat is superior to futile charge. The moral dimension of acceptance is subtle. To accept that someone else will not reciprocate does not absolve them of responsibility. It absolves you of the burden of self-blame. To accept one's own limitations is not to indulge laziness. It is to assign tasks proportionate to capacity, then slowly expand capacity where possible. Moral energy is finite. If it is tied to impossible missions, it will be squandered. Acceptance redirects moral energy to available goods. Kindness one can perform, truth one can tell, care one can offer, excellence one can pursue within constraint. Metaphors help. Acceptance is like navigating a river. You cannot reverse the current nor flatten the rocks. You can learn the water's patterns, read its eddies, choose routes, and develop skill. You will collide at times. That is not failure but tuition. Over time, the pilot grows less surprised by turbulence and more focused on the stance of the boat, the angle of the oar, the coordination with companions. The river's power is constant. The pilot's effectiveness grows not by commanding the water, but by consenting to its nature and working with it. This practice requires patience. Modern culture rewards speed and visible achievement. Acceptance often operates in quiet and over longer horizons. The benefits are cumulative and compounding. As habits of acceptance solidify, small provocations lose their grip, rumination shortens, the baseline of tension lowers. This does not immunize anyone against sorrow or fear. It does, however, furnish a stable platform from which to encounter them. To someone unused to acceptance, such a life can appear detached. From the inside, it feels more engaged, not less, because attention is liberated from what cannot be done and offered to what can. Let us draw together the practical steps. Name clearly what cannot be changed. Be specific and concrete. Categorize concerns by control, influence, and non-influence. Allocate energy accordingly. Practice affect labeling and sensory grounding to metabolize surges of emotion. Anchor decisions and values that remain workable across contexts. Experiment respectfully to test the elasticity of constraints. Accept evidence when it becomes decisive. Set boundaries where acceptance reveals chronic harm. Translate clarity into action. Review and revise plans with humility about uncertainty. Use ranges in scenarios, not predictions. Cultivate gratitude for what remains possible. Gratitude is not denial. It is a calibration of attention. Examples illuminate the texture of these steps. A teacher loses the ability to project her voice due to a medical condition. After a period of searching for remedies, she accepts the limitation and redesigns her pedagogy. Smaller groups, more written instructions, technology that amplifies without strain, students tasked with rotating leadership. The constraint becomes a design parameter that improves student engagement. A parent recognizes that a child's developmental trajectory will not mirror the norm. Acceptance transforms expectations and reveals the child's actual strengths, allowing investment in environments where those strengths matter. A small business owner faces an economic downer. Acceptance leads to an orderly contraction instead of chaotic collapse, preserving reputation and relationships for future endeavors. There is an inner freedom that arises when one stops arguing with reality. It is the freedom to choose one's manner of walking through a landscape one did not select. Viktor Frankl, reflecting on experiences in extreme deprivation, wrote that everything can be taken but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude. This sentence has been repeated so often that it risks cliché, but its truth requires little ornament. Acceptance and attitude are companions. To accept is to clear the field. To choose an attitude is to plant it. The resulting harvest is not guaranteed, but it is more likely to nourish than the barren fields of refusal. Acceptance is not only personal, it is planetary. Climate systems, biodiversity loss, and geopolitical realities present a set of facts no individual can change alone. Denial wastes years, despair wastes will. Acceptance says, these are the numbers, this is the timeline, these are the likely dynamics. Given this, what role can I play that aligns with my values and skills? Perhaps the role is local, strengthening a community's resilience. Perhaps it is professional, improving efficiency in a domain. Perhaps it is civic, advocating for realistic policies. Acceptance becomes a foundation for solidarity because it discards illusions that isolate us. When we admit the scope of a problem, we can coordinate. There is a paradox worth noting. Acceptance often precedes change. When a person accepts that they cannot force sleep, they often sleep. When someone accepts that they cannot control another's opinion, they often become more persuasive because anxiety loosens its grip and listening improves. When a team accepts a constraint, creativity is triggered, yielding solutions invisible before. In each case, the relinquishment of impossible control reduces noise in the system, allowing natural processes, rest, rapport, imagination to function. This is not magic. It is the removal of interference. Yet the practice is fragile. Under stress, old patterns return. It helps to build rituals that anchor acceptance into daily life. These need not be elaborate. A morning review of the Control Influence No control lists. A brief evening gratitude practice, naming 3 specific things that were good or instructive. A cue-based routine. When frustration rises, take 3 breaths, name the feeling, identify the category, choose the next right action. Over time, these rituals become grooves the mind follows with less effort. If they are neglected, the slope back to resistance is steep. Compassion toward oneself in this cycle is essential. Beating oneself for failure to accept is just another form of resistance. Language matters. Phrases such as "this should not be happening" or "I can't stand this" amplify tension. Replace them with "this is happening" and "I dislike this and can stand it for now." And the nervous system receives a different instruction. Cognitive therapy calls these balanced thoughts. They make acceptance articulate. Similarly, the word "always" is often a tell of cognitive distortion. Acceptance prefers precision, often, in this instance, for now. Precision honors reality and reduces the brain's impulse to escalate. Spiritual traditions have long cultivated acceptance as a pathway to peace. In prayer, in meditation, in rituals of surrender, the human-animal practices recognizing its limits before larger realities. Whether one grounds this in a theistic framework or in a secular awe before the universe's vastness, the emotional consequence is similar. Humility without humiliation. Humility says, "I am small, and that is fine." Humiliation says, "I am small, and that is shameful." Acceptance belongs to humility. From this stance, joy becomes less conditional, less tied to perfect circumstances. It becomes available in the midst of imperfect ones. It is tempting to make acceptance into a personal brand, a badge of stoicism. Be cautious. Genuine acceptance is supple. It does not pose. It cries when crying is warranted and laughs when laughter is warranted. It does not insist on a uniform expression of composure. It is not an armor, but a garment tailored to movement. The test is not how serene one appears, but how well one chooses under constraint. Less cruelty, more clarity. Less rumination, more action. Less blame, more responsibility. Finally, we return to the initial claim. Acceptance is not capitulation, but a cultivated discipline. It sharpens perception, aligns values, and concentrates commitment. It protects dignity, strengthens agency, and makes room for meaning. Because it is both a skill and an attitude, it can be learned and it can deepen across a lifetime. Anyone can begin where they are, with the next fact that resists their will, with the next impulse to argue with reality. Pause. Name it. Ask what remains possible. Decide. Act. In these small movements, the art is practiced, and the life it shapes is more resilient, more honest, and more free. There is a second movement in the art of accepting what cannot be changed. The integration of acceptance into creativity, leadership, and legacy. If the first movement trains the individual to discern limits and direct energy wisely, the second movement expands the canvas, inviting us to shape environments that normalize acceptance as a form of wisdom rather than a stigma of weakness. What would it look like to design homes, schools, workplaces, and communities that teach and embody this art? How might institutions become less adversarial with reality and more skillful at aligning with it? These questions are not abstractions. They touch the texture of daily life. Begin with education. A curriculum that honors acceptance does not lower standards, it clarifies them. Students are taught to distinguish effort from outcome, process from result. Grading practices can reflect growth as well as performance. Feedback can be specific, focused on behaviors within control, while transparently naming factors beyond control. Such pedagogy inoculates against the perfectionism that breeds avoidance. Programs that integrate social-emotional learning often include elements of mindfulness and cognitive reframing, and data from these programs show reduced disciplinary incidents and improved academic outcomes. When students internalize a model in which reality's constraints are acknowledged, they tend to persist longer and recover faster after setbacks. The narrative changes from "I failed," so "I am a failure" to "I tried this, it did not work under these conditions. I will revise." Workplaces can operationalize acceptance through decision-making frameworks. Scenario planning, pre-mortems, and explicit risk ranges are forms of institutional acceptance. They admit uncertainty and limit overconfidence. Organizations that run pre-mortems, imagining a project as failed and asking why, identify vulnerabilities in advance. This practice is acceptance in action. We accept that failure is possible and test our plans against that reality. Psychological safety is another domain where acceptance matters. Teams where members can admit uncertainty or error without punitive backlash learn faster. They accept that ignorance and fallibility are facts of human work and design processes to catch errors early. Toyota's end in Cord is a case in point. Any worker can halt the line to address a problem. This system accepts that defects will occur and empowers response. The result is better quality and less waste. Creativity thrives within constraints. Artists, engineers, and entrepreneurs know this instinctively. A painter limited to a monochrome palette studies value and texture more deeply. A coder working with limited memory optimizes with elegance. A startup with a small budget innovates with focus. When constraints are accepted rather than lamented, attention shifts to the affordances they create. The history of art is filled with examples. Haiku's syllabic strictures yield distilled insight. Sonnets contain flame in 14 lines. Jazz improvisation accepts a chord progression as scaffolding for invention. Acceptance here is not a defeat, but a design parameter. The refusal to acknowledge constraints produces work that is sprawling and confused. Acceptance produces work that is coherent and resonant. On the personal level, creativity married to acceptance becomes a method of meaning-making. Journaling with prompts that specifically ask, what is fixed? What is flexible? Trains the mind to habitually separate the givens from the variables. Rituals of renewal, walks without devices, time-bound digital Sabbaths, attention to sleep and nutrition are concrete acknowledgments of the body's non-negotiable needs. One cannot bargain with biology. In honoring its limits, output often improves rather than declines. Productivity research consistently shows that rest is not a luxury, but a condition for sustained performance. Acceptance of circadian rhythms, cognitive load limits, and the diminishing returns of extended hours allows one to work with the brain rather than against it. In the realm of health behavior, the distinction between acceptance and avoidance is medically relevant. Pain acceptance has been studied in chronic pain populations. Higher pain acceptance correlates with lower disability and distress, independent of pain intensity. The explanation lies partly in behavior. Those who accept pain are more likely to engage in valued activities despite discomfort, preventing the spiral of inactivity, deconditioning, and isolation. In anxiety disorders, acceptance-based strategies reduce avoidance and facilitate exposure, which is the engine of change. Here again we see the paradox. Accepting that anxiety will arise reduces its power, allowing the nervous system to habituate. Fighting anxiety feeds it. Leadership, at any scale, benefits from the humility of acceptance. Leaders who cannot accept limits overpromise and erode trust. Leaders who accept limits communicate honestly about constraints and invite participation in crafting responses. This does not mean constant pessimism. It means calibrated realism. During crises, the public senses the difference between spin and sober truth. History honors those who told the truth plainly and then rallied effort around what could be done. The language of such leadership rejects false certainties and vague reassurances in favor of transparent plans with contingencies. It says, in effect, we cannot change X. We will do Y and Z. Here is what we need from you. Here is what you can expect. This clarity reduces panic, which is often a byproduct of cognitive dissonance between official narratives and lived reality. There is also a legal and policy dimension. Effective policy accepts trade-offs. It refuses the myth of win-win in all cases. For instance, urban planning must reconcile the needs of mobility, housing, green space, and heritage. Acceptance acknowledges that gains in one domain can impose costs in another and requires making these trade-offs explicit and fair. In health policy, acceptance might mean recognizing that no system can provide everything immediately to everyone and therefore prioritizing based on severity, efficacy, and cost-effectiveness. This is not cold, it is honest. Honesty protects legitimacy because people can tolerate hardship better when they trust that leaders are operating in reality and using just criteria. On the level of identity, acceptance guards against the exhaustion of performance. Many live as if identity were a product assembled for an audience that never applauds loudly enough. Acceptance and identity says, you have a temperament, a history, a set of limitations, and you need not apologize for the shape of your humanity. This does not preclude growth. It provides a stable platform from which growth becomes sustainable. Trying to become someone you are not is a recipe for brittle achievement. Becoming more fully who you are, refined, disciplined, and responsibly adaptive, is a recipe for durable contribution. The distinction is subtle but decisive. The art we are considering also requires discernment about suffering. Some suffering is clean and some is dirty. Clean suffering is the pain that arises directly from contact with reality. Grief after a loss, fear and danger, fatigue after effort. Dirty suffering is the pain layered on by resistance, the self-accusation, the why me, the refusal to let facts be. Acceptance does not eliminate clean suffering, nor should it. It eliminates much of the dirty suffering. When the mind stops adding, subtraction occurs. Less tension, less bitterness, less secondary despair. This subtraction lightens the load one must carry and preserves energy for the duties of life. A question emerges: how does one teach acceptance to those who distrust it? The answer lies in modeling and in gradual exposure. If a mentor or parent visibly practices acceptance, naming their limits without self-contempt, adjusting plans calmly, admitting uncertainty, it becomes thinkable for others. Words alone will not suffice. People learn the emotional feel of acceptance by proximity. Gradual exposure means inviting small acts of acceptance in low-stakes contexts. A child wants sunshine, it rains. A plan is altered. The feeling of disappointment is named, not dismissed, and an alternative activity is found. Over time, the child learns that life can be good even when it is not as desired, and that their agency remains intact. Community rituals can reinforce this learning. Moments of silence, public acknowledgments of loss, ceremonies that mark transitions, all of these honor the unchangeable and provide containers for emotion. In traditional societies, rites of passage encoded acceptance. You have crossed a threshold. Something has ended and something has begun. You cannot go back. Modern life, for all its freedoms, often neglects these rituals, leaving people to experience change without communal stories that dignify it. Reintroducing them, with sensitivity to diversity and pluralism, can heal the fragmentation that isolates individuals in their private struggles with reality. Technology presents special challenges and opportunities. It offers unprecedented tools for altering environments and bodies, which can feed the illusion that everything is malleable. It also offers feedback loops, data on sleep, heart rate, productivity, that can teach acceptance through measurement. If a wearable shows that caffeine late in the day degrades sleep, acceptance becomes easier. The evidence is visible. If a productivity application reveals that deep work peaks at certain hours, schedules can be aligned. The risk is to turn acceptance into control by proxy, using data to pursue a fantasy of perfect optimization. The antidote is to pair measurement with mercy. Use information to cooperate with your limits, not to harass yourself. Faith traditions frame acceptance within doctrines of providence, impermanence, or fate. These metaphysical lenses can either liberate or constrict, depending on how they are held. Held generously, they inspire trust and patience. Held rigidly, they can feed fatalism or excuse injustice. A healthy theology or philosophy of acceptance will keep two truths in tension. Much is beyond us, and much remains our duty. The prayer that asks for serenity to accept what cannot be changed, courage to change what can, and wisdom to know the difference is wiser than its ubiquity suggests. The final clause, wisdom to know the difference, is the hinge. Without it, serenity and courage misfire. Let us return to practice with an expanded toolkit. Conduct weekly acceptance audits. Review projects, relationships, and personal habits. Identify where resistance masquerades as perseverance. Decide explicitly what to cease. Use if-then plans that pre-accept variability. If the meeting runs over, then I will defer tasks X and Y rather than rush them. This reduces stress when variability arrives. Create acceptance anchors in your space. A phrase on a card, a stone from a place of meaning, a photo that recalls perspective. Visual cues prompt the stance you intend. Rehearse difficult conversations with acceptance as the premise. I accept that they may respond defensively. My role is to speak clearly and kindly. This sets expectations that protect composure. Keep an already true list when distress rises. Write what is already true that you cannot change, and what is already good that you might be overlooking. This stabilizes attention. Stories deepen abstraction. An engineer spent a decade on a project that was eventually canceled due to regulatory shifts. At first, his identity collapsed. Over time, acceptance arrived as he separated the uncontrollable elements from his contribution. He listed what the work had given him: competence, friendships, reputation for integrity. He redirected these assets into a new domain, bringing with him the discipline learned in the previous effort. Years later, he described the canceled project not as a waste, but as a foundation. Acceptance did not rewrite history. It reinterpreted it without distortion. A caregiver watched a parent's memory fragment. Early on, she tried to correct inaccuracies, pulling her loved one back into a shared past. This produced agitation and conflict. A therapist suggested acceptance, entering the parent's reality when harmless, orienting gently, prioritizing calm over factual correction. The atmosphere shifted. The caregiver's sorrow remained, but the daily rhythm softened. Acceptance improved the quality of the remaining time, not by pretending the disease was otherwise, but by moving with it. A runner suffered an injury that precluded high-impact activity. For months, he resisted, dabbling in treatments while mourning the loss of a beloved habit. Acceptance began when he tried swimming seriously. He discovered a new rhythm, different but satisfying. The identity of runner stretched into athlete. He found fellowship in a new community and, in time, gratitude replaced bitterness. He still missed running. Acceptance did not eliminate longing. It made room for it alongside new goods. When we speak about legacy, acceptance may seem an unlikely candidate. Yet legacy that endures is often shaped by people who married ambition to acceptance. They aimed high without lying about obstacles. They accepted that they would not finish everything and therefore chose what to begin. They accepted that recognition might not arrive and therefore drew motivation from values rather than applause. Their work's resonance grew because it was rooted in reality. They did not burn out in the friction of impossibility. One practical technique for legacy planning is the finite horizon exercise. Imagine a horizon 3 to 5 years out. Accept that resources, time, and attention are limited. Given this, select 2 or 3 domains where contribution matters most to you. Design commitments that are robust to volatility. For example, rather than a fragile goal, publish a bestseller. Choose a resilient one. Write 2 hours daily. Refine craft. Share work consistently. Both may lead to publication. Only one relies on variables you control. Acceptance of the horizon's finitude sharpens focus and deepens the quality of work within it. We cannot overlook the role of gratitude as a companion to acceptance. Gratitude is often miscast as a command to feel thankful, which can feel false under strain. Better to think of it as a method of attention. By naming what is good that is also true, gratitude complements acceptance, which names what is difficult that is also true. Together, they form a pair of lenses through which the world appears neither worse nor better than it is, but more complete. Practices of gratitude: writing a weekly letter of appreciation, noting small blessings, expressing thanks aloud. Do not negate hardship. They prevent hardship from monopolizing the field of view. There is courage in admitting, "I cannot change this." The sentence can feel like a door closing, yet often another door opens. "I can change how I meet this." In the space behind that door is a range of possibilities. Choosing kindness over bitterness, asking for help instead of hiding, simplifying rather than compounding, resting instead of pushing past exhaustion, finding the words that speak truth without violence. None of these erase the unchangeable, but they redeem the moment from waste. As the practice matures, people report a quiet joy that is less dependent on favorable weather. Joy here is not exuberance, it is steadiness. It is the capacity to savor without clinging, to mourn without drowning, to strive without desperation. It is the recognition that life's worth is not a function of control, but of participation, of showing up to what is given and contributing what one can. Acceptance is the gateway to this participation because it removes the condition that life must conform to our blueprint before we will consent to live it. We can end where we began, with clarity. The world contains givens, gravity, mortality, time's arrow, other minds and contingents, habits, policies, skills, relationships. Confusing these categories generates needless suffering. Distinguishing them generates freedom. The art of accepting what cannot be changed is not a narrow art. It is comprehensive. It informs how we think, speak, design, lead, love, and persevere. It is the art of consenting to reality so fully that our efforts become aligned with it. From that alignment flows power. The power to do the next right thing, to speak the next truthful word, to take the next compassionate step. This is not the power of domination, but the power of integrity. It is available in every circumstance because it begins in the mind and extends through the will into action. If you doubt that acceptance can be learned, begin now with something small. Choose a minor irritation that recurs, a delayed train, a cue, a change in plans. When it arrives, notice the first wave of resistance. Name it, breathe, ask what, within this moment, is up to you. Perhaps it is to read a page, to observe without judgment, to send a message of kindness. Do this once, then again. Tiny practices, repeated, carve channels in the mind. In time, when larger waves come, you will find that you do not drown. You float, and you swim, and you reach the shore with your integrity intact. This, finally, is the promise of acceptance. Not that pain vanishes, not that outcomes bend to your will, but that your life becomes a coherent answer to the question every day asks. Given what is true, how will you live?